Welcome to my videos. Microsoft AZ-104 latest exam questions and answers set 9. You have an Azure subscription that contains an Azure storage account. You plan to create an Azure container instance named Container1 that will use a Docker image named Image1. Image1 contains a Microsoft SQL Server instance that requires persistent storage. You need to configure a storage service for Container1. What should you use? A. Azure Files. B. Azure Blob Storage. C. Azure Queue Storage. D. Azure Table Storage. Correct answer. A. You have an app named App1 that runs on two Azure virtual machines named VM1 and VM2. You plan to implement an Azure availability set for App1. The solution must ensure that App1 is available during planned maintenance of the hardware hosting VM1 and VM2. What should you include in the availability set? A. 1 update domain. B. 2 fault domains. C. 1 fault domain. D. 2 update domains. Correct answer. D. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription1. You have 5 terabytes of data that you need to transfer to Subscription1. You plan to use an Azure import/export job. What can you use as the destination of the imported data? A. An Azure Cosmos DB database. B. Azure Blob Storage. C. Azure Data Lake Store. D. The Azure File Sync Storage Sync Service. Correct answer. B. Drag drop. You have an Azure subscription that contains an Azure file share. You have an on-premises server named Server1 that runs Windows Server 2016. You plan to set up Azure File Sync between Server1 and the Azure file share. You need to prepare the subscription for the planned Azure File Sync. Which 2 actions should you perform in the Azure subscription? To answer, drag the appropriate actions to the correct targets. Each action may be used once, more than once, or not at all. You may need to drag the split bar between panes or scroll to view content. Note: each correct selection is worth 1 point. Select and place. Actions. First action: create a storage sync service. Second action: install the Azure File Sync agent. You have an Azure subscription that contains the file shares shown in the following table. You have the on-premises file shares shown in the following table. You create an Azure File Sync group named Sync1 and perform the following actions. Add Share1 as the cloud endpoint for Sync1. Add Data1 as a server endpoint for Sync1. Register Server1 and Server2 to Sync1. For each of the following statements, select Yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select Number. You can add Share3 as an additional cloud endpoint for Sync1 statement. No. You can add Data2 as an additional server endpoint for Sync1 statement. Yes. You can add Data3 as an additional server endpoint for Sync1 statement. No. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription1 that contains the resources shown in the following table. You plan to configure Azure Backup Reports for Vault 1. You are configuring the diagnostics settings for the Azure Backup Reports log. Which storage accounts and which log analytics workspaces can you use for the Azure Backup Reports of Vault 1? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Storage accounts: Storage 1, Storage 2, and Storage 3. Log analytics workspaces: Analytics 3 only. You have an Azure subscription that contains the storage accounts shown in the following exhibit. Use the drop-down menus to select the answer choice that completes each statement based on the information presented in the graphic. You can create a premium file share in Contoso 104 only. You can use the archive access tier in Contoso 101, Contoso 102, and Contoso 103 only. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription1. In Subscription1, you create an Azure file share named Share1. You create a shared access signature, SAS, named SAS1 as shown in the following exhibit. To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. If on September 2, 2018, you run Microsoft Azure Storage Explorer on a computer that has an IP address of 193.77.134.1, and you use SAS1 to connect to the storage account, you will have no access. If on September 10, 2018, you run the net use command on a computer that has an IP address of 193.77.134.50, and you use SAS1 as the password to connect to Share1, you will have read, write, and list access. You have two Azure virtual machines named VM1 and VM2. You have two recovery services vaults named RSV1 and RSV2. VM2 is backed up to RSV1. You need to back up VM2 to RSV2. What should you do first? A. From the RSV1 blade, click Backup Items and stop the VM2 backup. B. From the RSV2 blade, click Backup. From the Backup blade, select the backup for the virtual machine, and then click Backup. C. From the VM2 blade, click Disaster Recovery, click Replication Settings, and then select RSV2 as the Recovery Services Vault. D. From the RSV1 blade, click Backup Jobs and export the VM2 job. Correct answer. C. You have a general-purpose v1 Azure storage account named Storage1 that uses locally redundant storage, LRS. You need to ensure that the data in the storage account is protected if a zone fails. The solution must minimize costs and administrative effort. What should you do first? A. Create a new storage account. B. Configure object replication rules. C. Upgrade the account to general-purpose version 2. D. Modify the replication setting of Storage1. Correct answer. C. You have an Azure subscription that contains the storage accounts shown in the following table. You plan to manage the data stored in the accounts by using lifecycle management rules. To which storage accounts can you apply lifecycle management rules? A. Storage1 only. B. Storage1 and Storage2 only. C. Storage3 and Storage4 only. D. Storage1, Storage2, and Storage3 only. E. Storage1, Storage2, Storage3, and Storage4. Correct answer. D. You create an Azure storage account named Contoso Storage. You plan to create a file share named Data. Users need to map a drive to the data file share from home computers that run Windows 10. Which outbound port should you open between the home computers and the data file share? A80, B. 443, C. 445, D. 3389. Correct answer. C. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription1. You have 5 terabytes of data that you need to transfer to Subscription1. You plan to use an Azure import/export job. What can you use as the destination of the imported data? A. Azure File Storage. B. An Azure Cosmos DB database. C. Azure Data Factory. D. Azure SQL database. Correct answer. A. You have an Azure subscription that contains an Azure storage account named Storage Account 1. You export Storage Account 1 as an Azure Resource Manager template. The template contains the following sections. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. A server that has a public IP address of 131.107.103.10 can access Storage Account 1. Statement. Yes. Individual blobs in Storage Account 1 can be set to use the archive tier. Statement. Yes. Global administrations in Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, can access a file share hosted in Storage Account 1 by using their Azure AD credentials. Statement. No. You have an Azure subscription that contains a storage account named Storage1. You have the devices shown in the following table. From which devices can you use AsCopy to copy data to Storage1? A. Device 1 only. B. Device 1, Device 2 and Device 3. C. Device 1 and Device 2 only. D. Device 1 and Device 3 only. Correct answer. B. You have an Azure storage account named Storage1 that contains a blob container named Container1. You need to prevent new content added to Container 1 from being modified for 1 year. What should you configure? A. The access tier. B. An access policy. C. The access control, IAM, settings. D. The access level. Correct answer, B. You have an Azure storage account named Storage1 that contains a blob container. The blob container has a default access tier of hot. Storage1 contains a container named Container1. You create lifecycle management rules in Storage1 as shown in the following table. You perform the actions shown in the following table. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. On October 10th, you can read dep1 file 1, doc, statement. Yes. On October 10th, you can read file 2, doc, statement. Yes. On October 10th, you can read file 3, doc, statement. Yes. You are configuring Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, authentication for an Azure storage account named Storage1. You need to ensure that the members of a group named Group1 can upload files by using the Azure portal. The solution must use the principle of least privilege. Which 2 roles should you configure for Storage1? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Note: each correct selection is worth 1 point. A. Storage account contributor. B. Storage blob data contributor. C. Reader. D. Contributor. E. Storage blob data reader. Correct answer, B, C. You have an Azure storage account named Storage1 that stores images. You need to create a new storage account and replicate the images in Storage1 to the new account by using object replication. How should you configure the new account? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Account type: storage v2 or blob storage only. Object type to create in the new account: container. You have an on-premises server that contains a folder named dfolder1. You need to copy the contents of dfolder1 to the public container in an Azure storage account named contasodata. Which command should you run? A. https://contasodata.blob.core.windows.net/public. B. As copy sync dfolder1 https://contasodata.blob.core.windows.net/public snapshot. C. As copy dfolder1 https://contasodata.blob.core.windows.net/public recursive. D. As storage blob copy start batch dfolder1 https://contasodata.blob.core.windows.net/public. Correct answer, C.